Between 1970 and 1979, rock supergroup Emerson, Lake and Palmer took the world by storm. ELP sold over 30 million records and played to over 4 million people in more than 2,000 venues across the world. In Britain and the United States alone, the band notched up 6 top 10 albums and enjoyed huge popularity. This is the story of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, how it came to be and how it came to end.
Just take a pebble and cast it to the sea. Then watch the ripples that unfold into me. My face spills so gently into your eyes, disturbing the waters of our lives,
By the first half of 1970, Keith Emerson, Greg Lake and Carl Palmer were 3 young men in a hurry. Each of them was already a member of an established act. Singer, bassist and guitarist Greg Lake had been in King Crimson with Robert Fripp. Carl Palmer had drummed for the Crazy World of Arthur Brown and Atomic Rooster. Keith Emerson was the manic keyboard star of The Nice.
What I was writing late '69 needed a singer, a real singer. And I became aware of Greg Lake with King Crimson.
King Crimson and The Nice were both on tour in America at the same time. Not together, but separately. And we met up right at the end of the tour. We were both on the bill at the Fillmore West in San Francisco.
I sauntered down the corridor and there was Greg Lake sitting in this very stuffy armchair, surrounded by a lot of roadies who were lighting his cigarettes, holding the call to the Crimson King.
And we chatted, you know, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, my band's finished, really." And he said, "Well, you know, The Nice has kind of come to an end for me. I don't think I can do a lot more than I've done with it. How about, you know, putting a band together?" And that was the kickoff of ELP, really.
We needed a drummer, and which were very, few and far between, really.
We looked at a few people. Among them were Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience. But eventually, we came across Carl.
And I went to a little rehearsal room just off Soho Square, and that was the first time that I played. And I wasn't really, that sure then. They said, "Look, we need a decision. You've got to make a decision." And I said, "Okay, yeah, let's give this a shot." I knew Atlantic Records were involved, and I just needed a sort of a play-out period for my band, the Atomic Rooster.
In fact, Carl's the only drummer we did play with. Once we played with him, that was it. We just decided instantly that he was the right guy, and that was ELP. Keith, as a musician, is extraordinarily talented. He plays with 100% commitment, and that's what attracted me to Keith, really, his playing. It's certainly been, at the backbone of ELP's music.
Wanna be an angel, you wanna be a star, you wanna play some magic on my guitar.
Greg had a great voice, and was a very good bass player and a very good guitar player. So that was a plus factor. And Carl, having had the classical training that he had, I was able to relate to Carl in rhythmic patterns.
There's no doubt that from a musical point of view, it was more challenging. It was of a higher caliber, and the musicianship was definitely more in the way that I would like to go. And of course, the people themselves, Greg and Keith, it was a fantastic experience working with them at the very beginning. There was an awful lot of enthusiasm.
All I wanted to do at that particular time was get the best goddamn trio together that you'd ever heard.
And so a rock supergroup was formed. Expectations were high, and now it was time to show what ELP could do.
Because we'd all come from relatively well-known bands, the focus was immediately on the band to deliver and to record and to perform.
Bands normally rehearse 6 weeks at the most in those days, but we did like 6 months, and it was full on, 5 days a week. And I think when you get that injection of time and enthusiasm, you do end up cultivating something that's quite special. And it was.
With only one warm-up gig, ELP launched themselves on the world in front of 600,000 people at the Isle of Wight Festival on August the 29th, 1970.
The plan to launch Emerson, Lake and Palmer was built around the Isle of Wight Festival because they were not shy people, and they didn't really need to learn how to stand in front of an audience and all that.
We'd already played one live gig in Plymouth, 400 people in the room, and the next gig you're offered is the Isle of Wight.
Which was ridiculous, really. I mean, 600,000 people. And although it was a great opportunity, it was very much like Russian roulette, you know.
Even before we'd played our first note on stage, we'd had all these accolades and we were getting awards and stuff. So there was a terrific amount of pressure.
We came in at the last minute, we were the hot thing on the street, so to speak, and the management managed to pull some strings and get us this 45-minute slot. That's all we could have.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for their first debut performance ever, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Huge events like the Isle of Wight Festival didn't worry me at all, because it's just a whole sea of faces. You know, you just go on stage and...
It was dark. I couldn't see past the first 5 rows. It could have been like playing the first gig to me, because it was kind of a natural thing for us to do. We liked doing stuff like that, even at an early stage, because we were so well rehearsed. We were extremely confident.
The performance at the Isle of Wight, I decided to really go to town. I went down King's Road with my roadie and we found 2 antique cannons, trying to sort of like do a Tchaikovsky with the 1812. I remember playing the last chords of the Great Gates of Kiev, and this Italian photographer was leaning over the barrel of the cannon. I was trying to say, get off, but when the cannons went off, he went into the audience.
I was always slightly upset about that, because I didn't have a cannon in the front of the stage, but I'll let that go.
It certainly woke the audience up. Good way to start.
I'm sure the impact within the industry and for ELP's career was very, very special. It
just put us on the map, not just in the UK, but this went around the world, really. Globally, we were now an entity. We were something to be listened to, and we were going to change the world musically, hopefully. That was our deal.
Certainly the music at the time was pretty weird, even by King Crimson standards.
I think people thought this was very interesting because it was an excursion into classic rock. I mean, they were really the archetypal band who introduced the classics into their music.
I thought the use of classical music within the framework of the musical direction of the band was perfect.
And it seemed that Greg was quite willing to go in that direction as well.
The world wanted more of ELP. Recording continued unabated for the band's debut album, which was to be released in the UK on the 20th of November 1970. The sessions were not without incident.
We went into the studio to record the first album without any material, really. I mean, we were just pulling stuff out of thin air and classical interpretations of this, and you know, it was a very rushed process to get that first record made.
First album, yes, instant smash. Never understood exactly why, to be really honest with you. One side of it was all sort of like church organ, the Three Fates or whatever. Nevertheless, it did have one great single on it, Lucky Man.
Lucky Man, well, that was very much Greg's song, I think. Lucky Man.
White lace and feathers, they made up his bed. A gold-covered mattress on which he was led. Ooh, what a lucky man he was.
I remember when we got to the end of making the first album, we'd come to the end of the material we had, and so everybody looked around the studio, you know, has anybody got any more ideas? So I said, look, I've got this song I wrote when I was 12 years old, is when I wrote it. It's called Lucky Man. And I played it to Keith, and he really couldn't see much in it.
Carl and I came into Advision Studios one midday session, and Greg had been in there since the morning and playing an acoustic guitar and singing this piece of sounded like a folk song to me. And I said to Carl, I said, where did that one come from?
And he had a couple of goes at playing with it, but he couldn't think of anything to play, and he left the studio. He was just disinterested in it. And I think Carl said to me, look, you know, we've got to have something here. Let's record it anyway.
It was a lot of overdubbing in the studio, and Carl playing as an afterthought, and me throwing on this Moog solo at the very end. A Moog solo which it was a one-off, and I didn't really like it.
Keith came back in the studio and heard it, and of course, you know, could see then it had developed into quite a nice song. So I got him to play a Moog solo on the end, because otherwise he wouldn't have been on the record at all. I made sure I caught the very first thing he played. And the very first thing he played was he was experimenting with the portmanteau effect, which is when the notes slide up and slide down. When the pass had finished, we played it back. So I said, Keith, you've really got to hear this, man. It's really good. So he came in and eventually accepted that it was good.
It's stuck with me for like 35 years now, and I can't play anything else. Everybody wants that solo, you know. That's okay.
Little did we know that later on, of course, it took off in America and it became the single of the band.
We got to America the first time, and I think when we drove from JFK Airport into the city of New York, the limo driver had a radio going, and Lucky Man came on. I went, what? You know, I turned to Greg, who was sort of like looking out the window, like finding something else to do. How come this is a single?
I don't think it was a decision that the band had actually sat down and been part of. And I think it did cause a bit of tension in the band, because I think that Keith felt it wasn't really representative of Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
While the more traditional songs, such as Lucky Man, led the way for the band with radio airplay, Emerson's neoclassical direction was attracting legions of fans everywhere.
I don't think there was anyone at the time when we started off playing classical adaptations like we did within the rock sort of genre, as it were. And that has helped us in a way, because it has pulled us apart from the rest. The style that we projected seemed to be acceptable around the world instantaneously.
I seem to recall that the band really was received pretty much the same wherever we went. People were just very, very enthusiastic.
In 1972, ELP swept the Melody Maker polls, including wins for Best Group and Best Composers.
From seeds of confusion, illusions, dark blossoms have grown.
Their popularity had also received a huge boost from the release of the live recording of longtime stage favourite Pictures at an Exhibition. International sales from Pictures at an Exhibition confirmed that ELP had arrived on the world stage. The band were now into an intensive period of touring and recording that would last for 4 prolific years.
I think the first 5 years are quite a haze, because when you're moving that fast and there's so much productivity coming out, you can't actually enjoy it because you're in it, you are it.
My recollection of those early ELP years is a bit of a blur, and the reason is that every single day was extraordinary. Extraordinary. We were very quickly playing 60,000 seat stadiums on a nightly basis, and we toured, it seemed as though it was non-stop.
When they got on stage, they were mind-blowing. To me, they were, if you like, the precursor of Queen, who had that raw energy that translated across the stage, and that was the key to their success.
The day we stopped touring, you know, 5 or 6 days later, we were in the studio recording.
It's called here. No one. I think it's B.
The touring schedule was relentless. By 1972, ELP had acquired all the trappings of a rock supergroup on the march. Japan was next in their sights.
We all met at the airport, and there was a wonderful kind of camaraderie amongst the travelling members.
When we got to Japan and we arrived, is a mob of screaming girls who are tearing the guys apart. We eventually managed to escape and get to the hotel. We're sitting in the hotel. The guys are thinking they're the Beatles.
I was bruised. I could feel where I'd been pinched and
And I think the promoter, Mr. Udo, comes over and he says to me, were they all at the airport, all the girls? I said, yeah, it's unbelievable. You should have seen it. He said, oh, thank goodness.
The very first concert that we did in Tokyo happened in the middle of a typhoon called Phyllis.
It was like treacherous rain. I mean, just pouring so hard. It would hurt you if you stood out in it.
And at one point, Carl Palmer looked like he was playing in a waterfall, like a souped-up octopus in this downpour. You know, the rain was bouncing off his drums and things. It was really quite dramatic.
And then there was the Osaka Stadium, I believe it was called, we played, which was a great place to play. The only thing was the Japanese people were not used to large rock concerts, so they had the stage set up in one corner of this baseball stadium.
And there was about 50,000 people there. And we were playing on the football pitch in the middle of the grass in the stadium, and the kids were all behind the fences up in the seats.
And we couldn't understand why they were so far away. I mean, you couldn't see anyone. You could see that it was full, but you couldn't see it.
And of course, they were manic about getting close to the band.
So they started to come over the fences and there was a riot.
And they came running en masse, thousands of them, towards the stage.
And the riot police were called in with their batons and they were hitting the kids, and more kids were coming over from every direction.
And I remember it was during Carl's drum solo. And our manager at the time, a man called D. Anthony, grabbed hold of Keith and myself. He said, look, get in the car.
So both Keith and Greg disappeared to two waiting cars at the back of the stage and kind of sped off.
He was 2 hours getting out of there. And I remember him coming into the restaurant where Keith and I had already gone for dinner later, and he just walked in and he said, "You bastards."
By the end of 1973, ELP had released 5 albums in 3 momentous years, each of them a massive success, culminating in their masterpiece, Brain Salad Surgery.
Brain salad surgery. It'll work for you.
For any rock band to achieve real success, they need to crack America. ELP were no exception.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer in America was extraordinary. The people in America loved the band. English bands were popular at that time, but Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they played every town in America, and every town in America they could sell out an arena, and everywhere they were loved. ELP were something you had to go and see.
I want to hear Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
By April 1974, ELP had conquered America and were headlining the massive California Jam Festival, where they played to 350,000 fans.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I'm so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind that glass lies a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along.
They had 2 PA systems. They went back so far that one PA system wouldn't go far enough, so they had another one halfway back to play. It was just a massive gig.
Show in heaven, holler, you gotta see the show. It's a dynamo. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll. Right before your eyes, we pull up from the sky.
Once you're underway with those sort of performances, the nerves and everything disappear and you play and it just unfolds like any other show would. No, except when the response comes, of course, it's coming from 600,000 people instead of 6,000 people or whatever it is.
For 4 years, the ELP live show had been growing as a theatrical extravaganza. It climaxed at the California Jam.
was more influenced by guitar players, I think, than other keyboard players. Guitarists like Pete Townsend, Jimi Hendrix, and I was probably a little bit jealous about the guitar players that could roam around the stage and check out the audience. You know, I wanted to make the Hammond organ like a part of me, to be mobile, but it wasn't easy to make a 350-pound piece of equipment move with you on stage.
With Keith, when he got on stage and that vehicle was really working, he lifted the audience through his playing and his antics on stage like nobody else did at that time, and not many keyboard players have ever done since.
Keith in particular wanted to do things that were ever expanding. If there was a new piece of technology from Mr. Moog, Keith wanted it. I mean, Keith wound up with what looked like a kind of one of those old-fashioned telephone keyboards that you sometimes see operators, plugging into, like a demonic telephone operator on stage, putting plugs in.
I think by 72, beginning of 3, we were really kicking. We were starting to look at whatever pyrotechnics were available or allowed, whatever could be done technically, how much can be transported. But to have 3 articulated trucks with your name on the top, jammed to the gills with equipment, was extravagant. But the public loved it.
At the California Jam in 1974, ELP unveiled their latest piece of rock theatre. And then there was the money, a lot of money, and it wasn't all spent on fireworks and spinning pianos.
I think the great thing about sort of making the money that we were making in those days, it allowed me to experience all that I'd read as a developing teenager. So I suppose it was inevitable, really, that I thought, well, I suppose I could learn how to fly an aeroplane. I suppose I could learn how to scuba dive. Boy, yeah. Action Man. Water skiing. Yeah, I could do that as well.
Business was good and the empire was expanding. The band established Manticore as a fully fledged record label. ELP's albums continued to sell around the world, but in 1977 they returned to the singles charts with a track that resonates to this day. A dramatic reworking of Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man.
The interesting thing about Fanfare for a Common Man was that we had to get the permission of Aaron Copland, the composer. The publishing house said, forget it. So I got Mr. Copland's home number, called him up, and he was very friendly on the phone, and he says, send it to me, let me listen. And he loved it. And he called me and said, this is brilliant, this is fantastic, this is doing something to my music.
By this time, Keith, Greg and Carl had attracted plenty of attention as musicians in their own right.
Of course, by now you know, my next guest is none other than Keith Emerson.
I didn't sleep the night before, and I was absolutely in panic. I remember I was in the dressing room prior to doing the broadcast, and for one moment, I really wanted to run out of the studio. I've never been so fraught with stage fright.
Keith said to me, "Oh, would you come along with me and play on this show?" I said, "Well, wouldn't it look a bit strange if I'm there and Greg's not there?" He said, "Well, yeah, probably right." I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll wear my glasses and I'll bring a real strange-looking drum set that no one's ever seen me play before and just see if we can get away with it." And it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I think it sort of calmed Keith down a bit because there was somebody there that he knew, and I think he related to that, so that was good for him as well. I had a great time. Oscar Peterson's a lovely chap, you know.
And now let's bang the drum for somebody who 3 years running has been voted Drummer of the Year, Carl Palmer. Terrific jazz drumming from Carl Palmer there. 8 different engineering companies were involved in the manufacture of this kit, which is the very first electronic stainless steel drum kit in existence. And as you see as we get closer, it's beautifully decorated as well, because Carl had the idea of commissioning from a jeweller, Paul Raven, these very nice engravings. Raven did it for 6 months with a dentist's drill. There's a peacock, there's a beautiful squirrel, nibbling away there on another of the drums, there's a fox. Really nice they are, and there's even somewhere, I think, a hedgehog. Yes, there it is. Now, Carl got the idea of these pastoral scenes from the engravings on antique hunting rifles. The oriental gongs were made for him by a manufacturer in Switzerland, and the dragons were copied from a Japanese vase. They were painted by an art teacher in Fulham called Charlie. Well, that's the background. But one thing I wasn't aware of until I heard you rehearsing was this electronic effect that you get. Can you just demonstrate that for us?
That's a sequencer you're talking about, yes?
Yes, I think so.
That's the one with the 14 notes, and it repeats on the 14th. It sounds like this.
Meanwhile, Greg Lake wrote one of the best-known Christmas singles, which was only kept off the #1 spot by Bohemian Rhapsody.
They sold me a dream of Christmas. They sold me a silent night. They told me a fairy story till I believed in the Israelite. And I believed in Father Christmas. And I looked to the sky with excited eyes. Then I woke with a yawn in the first light of dawn. And I saw him and through his disguise.
Before embarking on the Works project in 1977, ELP took a 2-year break, during which their individual talents shone. But for ELP the band, it was more difficult. Issues that had their roots in the past resurfaced.
They said there'd be snow at Christmas. They said there'd be peace on earth. Hallelujah, Noel, be heaven on hell. The Christmas we get we deserve.
It wasn't that they hated each other, I don't think. It was just their different musical styles. So Greg would kind of pull the music around one way in his choice of set, Keith would pull it around another way in his choice.
And there was always this sort of 3 different people with a view of what the band should be. And I think Keith didn't want it to be always they take Greg's simple songs, but they were great songs. And he always wanted it to be the more, complicated musical parts of ELP. But of course, how is radio going to deal with something like Tarkus? It's a 20-minute piece of music.
This is a thing called Tarkus.
The story with Tarkus was that I think you have to go back to the success of Lucky Man. No one expected that to be the sort of anthem of ELP. It almost became the identifier of ELP. I think in many ways it jarred Keith, because I think Keith had seen it as, you know, an instrumentally led band. And I think when it came to recording the second album, he was really determined to see that the instrumental side of ELP got firmly established.
We'd already struggled to find a direction for the second album. And Carl presented me with a 10/8, 5/4 rhythm on the drums, and he said, "What do you think of this?" And I went, "Wow, you know, I like that." I said to him, "I've been working on something around that time signature myself." And I think about 2 weeks later, I had a sufficient enough material to present it to Greg. And I called him up, and he came round to my apartment and sat down at the upright piano, and I said, "Greg, listen to this. What do you think?" And there was silence after I'd finished it. I turned around and I said to, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Well," he took another draw on his cigarette, blew a voluminous cloud into the ceiling, and said, he said, "I think if you want to play that sort of stuff, I suggest you play it on your solo album."
I think Greg wasn't very happy with Tarkus at the front end. I think he thought it was too conceptual. It wasn't. Thought it was too far removed. I mean, it's quite a wild piece of music in its day. I mean, the time signature, which was 10/8, this rhythm which I'd given Keith, which I would have liked to have been credited for, but I didn't. I don't know why that happened that way.
It was a loop, and it just went round and over this loop of 5/4. And I thought that from a conceptual point of view, it didn't really offer a lot. For me as a singer, or a conceptualist, to build on or to get round.
Anyway, I'd really kind of had it, you know. I thought, well, I'll take Greg's advice. I'll form my own solo band, you know. And this is where I want. This is a direction I want to go in. And Greg was very stubborn. No, I don't play that stuff.
Keith, I think, had become so determined that he wanted to see this instrumental presence asserted that he sort of said, "Well, look, take it or leave it." This was a change, and I really wasn't comfortable with that sort of to be part of a writing dictatorship. And I did consider leaving the band at that time. I thought, you know, I really was only interested in writing collaborations.
The managers, David and John, said, "Well, Greg, we've booked the studio. We're going to have to pay for it anyway. If we cancel it tomorrow, why don't you just go down there and just give it a try," what Keith threatened. Greg turned up there and got his pencil and a piece of paper out and started writing down the notes, and before I knew it, Greg was behind the desk, producer's cap on, getting into it. "What about doing an overdub here?" "Oh, that's fine, Greg, I'll do anything you want." You know, if you say I'll play it. At least you're playing what I've written, you know?
I still feel to this day it didn't actually make a good concept. Unless you think, of course, an armadillo with tank tracks on it is a good concept.
Well, they call me the referee occasionally, you know. The reason why he seems to be going in different directions is because they're not listening to me, basically.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Keith had a way of getting his own. I mean, Keith was an enormous influence in the band in terms of the work and the musical input that he put in. And although he was quite laid back when you met him and talked to him as an individual, he also had a spine of sheer steel, and he had ways of getting what he wanted. I think even when perhaps he was outnumbered.
That's it. Let's just try that bit.
ELP has been about one thing and one thing only, about music. And if there's been any fights, it's been about music, but quite rightly so. because you never want to be in a band where there's one guy agreeing to everything sitting on the fence. You want to work with people who are opinionated, who are strong, and both Keith and Greg are strong.
Ding dong dong. Then you've got ding dong.
Ryan.
You can get away with it.
Greg and I hadn't really gelled together as sort of like writing music together, as in the way that McCartney and Lennon did. Sometimes we'd play one number like about 60, maybe 100 times, until we got everything exactly right. And then it was only then that Greg would go into the vocal booth and put the vocals on. And it was only then that I knew how this was going to turn out, because the lyrics weren't coming quickly. It was hard work for Greg.
Keith particularly would become impatient because he doesn't really understand, you know, what's involved in writing lyrics, and so there would always be that pressure afterwards.
The thing about Greg, of course, is that he did have a bit of reputation for being a bit of a prima donna. He did have this habit of like things, when he went to the hotel, he would get the biggest suite. But Greg had the biggest suite because he knew that that would be the meeting point. Keith didn't want the meetings in his room. Carl didn't want the meetings. So Greg took it upon himself to have the meeting place. I think Greg just took quite a lot of responsibility and felt because of that sometimes he could have a bit more comfort. And I think that was quite reasonable, actually.
I'll tell you what, get Francesca to get those two in that box and tell him that it says the quarantine scene is not worth it. All right?
Greg was very much the pushy boss man who drove everything.
Greg delighted in getting into lawyers and managers and all that. The managers that we used at the very beginning were all part of Greg's design.
He was very business-minded. He was certainly at the beginning taught me a lot. I think Keith was totally uninterested in the business. He was much more interested in the music. And when we had business meetings, he would sit and doodle. And I thought, oh, he's making notes. And I remember going to have a look at his notes, and it was all music.
I couldn't be bothered. I really couldn't be bothered. It was like, for me, the writing was important, and if the band played what I wrote, then I was a very happy guy.
There might have been things I missed, but don't be unkind. It don't mean I'm blind.
In the very beginning, it was three guys who were fiercely ambitious, working together to become superstars, and they achieved that. And I think their ambition overrode any possible differences of opinion, because at the end of the day, they just wanted to make it and sell lots of records and be superstars, which they achieved. I think once they got there, then probably the cracks began to form.
Maybe I might have changed, not been so cruel.
By the time the band decamped to Switzerland in 1976 to record the Works album, those cracks were widening.
We'd all moved into our sort of houses, which I lived up in Plymouth. Keith was down on the ocean, on the lake there, Lake Geneva. Greg was in the mountains.
And it threw everything out of kilter, you know. Our families, road man, everything had to move.
Kiev, he did a piano concerto. Greg, he did his own side, also using orchestra. And Carl did a mixture. And so we came up with the idea, which was clever at the time, was to have an album with one side E, one side L, one side P, and one side EL and P, which was the Works album.
It was a record, literally, of a band fracturing. And it was not a direction that I personally would have chosen to go in.
Nevertheless, the band pooled their talents and worked hard on a conceptual piece for the fourth side of Works Volume 1. This was to be the centrepiece of the album, with Emerson, Lake and Palmer in complete harmony.
I'd read Frederick Forsyth's The Dogs of War, and I'd started writing some music around the storyline of the book.
And I didn't really like the concept of mercenaries. I mean, just from a moral point of view, I didn't like it. And I came up with the idea of pirates.
Greg Lake and Peter Sinfield bought every book on pirates, watched every old Walt Disney film on pirates, and even went to Disneyland, where they went round on the boat in the Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, yo ho ho ho, a pirate's life for me. And they came back with daggers in their ears.
So it was a concept developed out of a lot of knowledge. And so the lyrics are very colourful because they contain a lot of the imagery of the time.
We'll block the hole with cups of gold. We'll feed the sea. I see your hunger for a fortune. Could be better served beneath my flag. If you've the stomach for a broadside, come aboard, my pretty boys.
Pete was agonising over the lyrics, and particularly the final line, "Gold drives a man to..." Gold drives a man to do what? Gold drives a man to commit adultery. Gold drives a man to dream. Dream, yeah, we'll use dream. That'll be good.
To dream.
We actually went to Paris, I think, to do the mixing. We were there putting it all together, and Leonard Bernstein was just across the road performing in the Paris Opera House. And I remember Keith was very interested in him hearing his piano concerto. A friend of ours who we were actually working with at the time, who was the owner of the studio in Switzerland, knew Leonard Bernstein. And he went and brought him over, you know.
Sure enough, I looked out and he'd arrived with his chauffeur and flowed into the control room. He listened to my piano concerto, which he made some sort of comment which I didn't understand.
All he said was, he said, "It reminds me of Grandma Moses," and left the room, you know. And I never found out to this day. I think she was an American artist, a painter or something.
But on the whole, he was very complimentary.
In the grand tradition of ELP, the Works Tour was designed to push the boundaries further back. This was rock and roll on an epic scale.
Here was a group going out with a full symphony orchestra, everybody being mic'd up. It would sound unbelievable.
As I recall, we had something like 120 or 30 people on the road. We had our own doctor, 11 tractor trailers, and it was a massive thing.
I remember having a complete sort of panic when I finally realised that it was going to actually happen. And I'd started it all, basically.
It was a brilliant and stupid idea.
I found it kind of hard work. It was musically quite fulfilling, but sometimes it seemed hard work for the result that I got.
The madness was, when you did the numbers, you would have to have done 110% business to break even. Unfortunately, business wasn't 110%, probably only about 80%, and we were losing a fortune.
It cost an astronomical amount of money to keep it going, and I won't say how much, but I know exactly what it cost.
Eventually, I think we ended up losing $3 million of our own money, I think, or more on that.
And that really was the beginning, I think, of the demise of the band. I think that's when it started to fall apart.
I don't think Greg and Carl have actually really forgiven me. I mean, it has come up so many times. If it hadn't been for you and your bloody orchestra, we'd have been millionaires by now. Yeah. There you go.
I think they get 10 out of 10 for doing it, because musically they were always pushing the boat out. It was always an extreme in style. So for them to do that with the orchestra was great.
By 1977, punk had exploded. Progressive rock was under attack. The world was changing, and for ELP the challenge was how to adapt.
I will still be here watching over you. So sleep, little darling, sleep on through.
Really, at that stage, the band had broken up. We didn't want to do anymore. We'd been going since 1970, right up to about 78. We'd had very little sort of time with our families, and we'd really worked very hard for 8 years.
We were essentially tired, both creatively and almost physically too.
It was just, I didn't really want to do anything. I was very happy living in the Bahamas, water skiing. I bought a boat and just wanted time off.
We went to Atlantic Records and explained to them that, you know, we really felt that it was time to do other things, at least for a period of time.
But Ahmed Ertegun, the president of Atlantic Records, wanted to meet with us because we did owe him another album.
So bottom line was that we were forced into making Love Beach.
Really, by that time, well, there was a lot of blame, namely on me, which didn't help the relationship between us all. You know, it doesn't take long before the media and your fans get to realise, well, if they're not touring with it, they didn't really, you know, we don't like Love Beach, and we don't think ELP like it either, you know, so, which is completely wrong. I mean, I love all the stuff that we've done. Our contemporaries like Yes, Genesis, all those other progressive movement lot managed to do the crossover very easily. They went from being progressive to actually becoming single material. I mean, Genesis particularly. But ELP, I don't know, we missed the boat on that one, although we tried.
Chasing the fantastic, to dive for tigers in the sky, to make the world stop to wonder why. Man living in a can, sleeping in a suitcase. Grail living in a gale, slipping on blue face.
Throughout their career, ELP had had a love-hate relationship with the press, and now the knives were out.
Musicians of their quality could very easily have gone on to do other things if they just treated things a little more simply and a little less, and become a little less involved. You know, they really did begin to disappear up their own backsides at the end, sadly.
There were certainly some people who took a dislike to the band and its music, and I could understand it in a way. You know, there we were trying to break down barriers in some senses of music, you know, by doing things like pictures at an exhibition. It was seen by some people to be pretentious.
As a group, they weren't that well liked in the music community. They were considered to be a bit quirky, oddball.
I think we were probably too good. That's it. I think if we'd have fucked up a bit more, then we might have got their sympathy, but I think we just intimidated a lot of critics, and it's very sad, really.
Whatever the critics might have said, it had been an incredible journey. By the time Keith, Greg and Carl drifted apart at the end of the Love Beach sessions in 1978, they had donated an impressive body of work to the history of rock. That work continues to sell in the form of 15 million further album sales and even occasional concerts. The legacy endures.
We did deal with everything on more of a cultural level, and I think we'll be remembered for that, whether it be the big shows we put on, or whether it be the albums that we made, or the technology that was used early on in the career of the band. I think those are the things that will be remembered.
The fact that we made classical music more accessible for young people, I think, is a contribution that the band made. I think ELP opened up the floodgates for an entire genre of music to be accessed by anyone, not just elitists. That's the legacy of ELP.
In Hollywood today, it'd be, the spinning piano. They don't remember the music. It's just that spinning around bit. That's okay, whatever. It's very difficult if you meet somebody if you're of the opposite sex and they say, oh, you're a musician. Now, can you sing something that maybe I know? Because normally, you know, they don't know the Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Very difficult to sing Tarkus, you know?
ELP's place in the history of music, I think, would be they were a band who broke all the rules, who took all the chances, who put everything into it. There was tremendous passion between them, fighting for what they believed. Sometimes they believed in different things, but it was this tension and fighting and real belief in what they did that made them special.
There's no end to my life, no beginning to my death. Death is life.
I think when you experience what we've experienced as three individuals, you can't just wipe it out of your life. Musically, it was so deep and meant such a lot, and still does today. I think I'll always have some connection with Keith, with Greg. Whether or not we're actually playing together, there'll always be a connection. There always has been.
It's a family, you know? You love each other, you hate each other, get on each other's nerves. But at the end of it all, I think, when I look back, you know, I love the other two guys and I respect them. It was my life.
With sadness on your shoulders, like a worn-out overcoat, in pockets creased and tattered, hang the rags of your hopes. The daybreak is your midnight, the colors have all died, disturbing the waters of our lives, of our lives, lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for their first debut performance ever, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Thank you very much. We'd like to do a number for you now, which will be on an album coming out pretty shortly. This is a number called Take a Pebble.
Take a pebble and cast it to the sea. Then watch the rivers that unfold into me. My face spills so gently into your eyes, disturbing the waters of our lives. Shreds of our memories are lying on your grass. Wounded words of laughter are graveyards of the past. Photographs of grey and torn, scattered in your fields. Letters of your memories are not real. like a worn-out overcoat. In pockets creased and tattered hang the rags of your hopes. The daybreak is your midnight. The colors have all died, disturbing the waters of our lives, of our lives, lives, lives. Of our lives.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is a thing called Pictures at an Exhibition, and it features the Moog synthesizer.
Which doesn't weigh 3 tons. Lead me from tortured dreams, childhood themes of nights alone. Wipe away endless years, childhood tears as dry as stone. From seeds of confusion, illusions, dark blossoms have grown. Even now in furrows of sorrow, the doubt still is sown. My life's course is guided, decided by limits drawn on charts of my past ways and pathways since I was born. Dust of a journey that cannot be shaken away. It found life deep within me, for I breathed it every day. You and I are yesterday's answers. The earth of the past come to flesh. Eroded by time's rivers to the shapes we now possess. In bright infinite moments, our reasons are lost in our lives.
Find a road, city dance, find a road, find a line, run like wolves, running lines for bags. I'm fool.
Lake and Palmer.